Okay, Alan, you're up in Orkney lending some support to the Yes campaign here. Um, in a sense, you're embodiment of the Central Belt, coming as you do from Falkirk. Many people in Orkney worry that they might be swapping a remote London government for a Central Belt government if there's independence. How could you reassure people in the peripheral areas that this won't happen?
Well, they will be swapping a remote London government for a central belt government. It's just that there are degrees of remoteness, and London is so remote from somewhere like Orkney that Orkney would be as well just not existent. Scottish government would certainly have to factor the needs of the people of Orkney in a way that London just doesn't have to. The power is still much closer to Orkney than it is when it's in London. So at the very least, it's an improvement, a considerable improvement in democracy. And with Holyrood government, I mean, it's obviously I understand that people in Orkney look at the Central Belt as being one unified mass, but it's no. I mean, Glasgow and Edinburgh are very different places. Falkirk, where I grew up, is neither Glasgow nor Edinburgh, and people in Falkirk don't feel represented by Edinburgh necessarily. So the issue is, how can all the people of Scotland and in independent Scotland make sure that the government in Holyrood is representing them? So I think that's an issue for everybody in Scotland, and that's much easier to do if they're closer to us. It's very difficult for anybody in Scotland to influence the Westminster government. It's very different for even our politicians in Holyrood at the moment to influence the Westminster government. Our votes don't influence which government gets chosen, and that has never been the case, despite what unionists would like us to think, which is that we'll all be abandoning the people of England to eternal Tory rule. If you actually look at the statistics, the Scottish vote has never made any influence on who gets in Westminster elections. So with independence, power is closer to the people. We can keep an eye on the government a lot easier, and that will have obvious benefits for democracy to everybody in Scotland, including the people of Orkney. There will be economic benefits, because there'll just be a lot more money coming back down the way from the top layer. At the moment, the financial system in the City of London is just, it's reckless, it's out of control, it's top heavy, it's greedy, and it's untouchable. And with a new Scottish democracy, we can change that. We can make the financial sector accountable to the people. Almost nobody I know in the independence movement doesn't want that. There is not a great capitalist lobby in the independence movement that's trying to make sure that the financial system remains unaccountable to the people. Or if there is, they will be defeated in independent Scotland, because the independence movement is by and large left-wing, certainly to the left of Labour and the Lib Dems, I would point out, given that the Lib Dems are supporting this system in London. So economically, there's going to be a lot more money finds its way back down to the people, which again will affect people living in Orkney.
Yeah.
Wow, I went off on one.
Oh, that's fine. Orkney's often perceived, and it is indeed an idyllic type of environment in which to live, and yet there's an underlying poverty also among low-paid people and people without work here. Also in the Highlands and Islands, a lot of joblessness among young people. How is independence going to help resolve these endemic problems of rural and youth unemployment?
Well, the sort of unemployment that you're talking about, and the sort of poverty that you've been talking about, first of all, has been created by policy in Westminster that was rejected by the people of Scotland. So Thatcher's programme, which was essentially to deindustrialise Britain, especially Scotland, has meant that we're now on the brink of, in the UK, a triple dip recession. I think we narrowly avoided it, but nobody has a plan to get us out of this mess except cut the public sector at all costs. That's the only plan Westminster has for us. All three parties at Westminster, that's the only plan. So the poverty that you're talking about, first of all, we can posit the blame in London with policies that we rejected. Secondly, with independence, we'll have the economic levers to be able to start redistributing wealth and investing in green energy programs, reindustrialising the nation, and correcting some of the mistakes that were made. But well, I think it's quite generous to call them mistakes. You could actually call it social and economic vandalism, which is how we should think about what Thatcher did to the country, and continued by Blair, and supported by the Lib Dems. But we can then go about recreating the Scotland that had been lost in different ways. Obviously it's difficult to bring back industries that were gone, but green energy, using the oil profits, which we will finally be able to have control of, vast oil profits that we've never been able to invest in this country. We can use that to invest in green energy programs all over the country that will then benefit the people of Scotland. So it's, I don't want to sit here and say poverty will disappear in an independent Scotland, because while we have a class system, there's always going to be a disparity between rich and poor. But it's steps. I'm a socialist. So for me, independent Scotland is the first step towards a socialist Scotland. Or a socialist British Isles for that matter, because my feeling is that once Scotland shows that it can go in this direction, England eventually will follow. So what I would say is the sort of poverty you're talking about that exists in places like Orkney, the only way that we can start to tackle that, the only way, is with independence. And if we vote no, well, we'll be left with that poverty forever.